60 minutes before the show.
And welcome back here to News Talk, continuing our conversation with Washington Post reporter Kelsey Snell and Republican strategist Bob Rustbalt. And we will dive right back into what is happening on the Hill. What we could expect to be a pretty busy day. Kelsey, we'll start with you. We've talked about the possible government shutdown. We heard from Boehner saying on Sunday that there is not going to be a shutdown now in terms of him stepping down from his position. What do you think in terms of moving forward, what we see this week?
Well, the Senate is going to vote today at 5:30 on a short-term clean CRs, clean meaning that it doesn't have any significant policy riders, and will fund the government at current levels through December 11th. We then expect the House to pick that up maybe tomorrow, and likely that will receive a significant number of Democratic votes and a fairly large number of Republican votes. That would then head to the president's desk and essentially prevent a shutdown. The questions that we have going forward, though, will be pretty significant in terms of resolving the actual issues underlying the spending fight here.
Absolutely. Something we will probably see as we get later into the week. Nearly 70% of voters, new poll coming out today, Quinnipiac University poll, oppose a government shutdown in an effort to defund Planned Parenthood. Yet 36% of Republicans said that they would support a shutdown in terms of this. It's likely now what we see that we will probably see this go through and then a separate bill for the Planned Parenthood, a separate measure. In terms of this all being resolved by one person's actions, why could we not get to a clean CR prior to this, do you think, Bob?
Well, we could. The question is whether the Speaker, Republican, wants to rely on Democratic votes or Republican votes. And it's always better to have a unified party going into any controversial legislation. It doesn't matter what the issue is or what the policy is. He didn't have enough Republican votes because of the Tea Party and wanting to defund Planned Parenthood, so he had to rely on Democratic votes. But don't forget, the real reason was the motion to vacate the chair, that once that he didn't include defunding Planned Parenthood in the CR, there was going to be a motion to vacate the chair. He did not want to force Republicans, particularly some in swing districts, where he knows John Boehner is a very, very smart guy. And he knows that there were a lot of Republicans that didn't want to have to make that vote because a lot of the Tea Party people would use that in a primary against them.
Kelsey, we move forward this week. We start to see what we heard him talk about. We heard Boehner talk about yesterday of not leaving behind a dirty barn and getting things done over the next 30 days. What else do you foresee will be done in the next 30 days?
Well, we anticipate that they'll start doing some serious work on a federal highway bill. It kind of speeds up the timeline, the idea that Boehner would be leaving. There's a wide support across the country for a long-term highway bill that would keep projects running for years into the future. I also expect that we might see some agreement between Democrats and Republicans and the House and the Senate about what the ultimate goals of a budget deal are. The question then is if McCarthy can hold together his party on that deal later.
A lot of questions up in the air. When we talk about what has been happening there over the past couple of months, as we move forward, we just heard you, Bob, say we're going to be sort of in this realm until we have a presidential candidate. How much does what we heard from the presidential candidates, moments, hours after we heard of Boehner stepping down, play a role in where the divisiveness sort of lies and who people will be sort of leaning towards in terms of where this goes? Because, you know, we definitely have seen each of those candidates take a different line on the Speaker stepping down.
Well, you've heard the quote-unquote outsider candidates running for president that were at the conference at National Harbor, and there was applause, wild applause, when they announced that John Boehner was resigning as Speaker and from the House. I think that's a shame. John Boehner has been a Republican workhorse for many, many years. Ironically, he came into Congress as part of the Gang of Seven. He was viewed as a radical when he came in.
Stirring the pot when he came in.
Yeah,
right.
The whole House Bank scandal and all of those sorts of things, and he was a major reformer. He's always been a reformer. But when you become Speaker of the House, it's a whole different kettle of fish than being a backbencher. And it's easy to throw grenades at the leadership, but it's tough to lead. So we'll see. I think this is going to keep going on for a while. I do not envy the position that Kevin McCarthy will be in, or whoever the next speaker is. It's going to be a very, very tough position. We know that John Boehner thinks that McCarthy would be a good speaker, and he seriously wants to get as much of this done as he possibly can. Interestingly, not many people are talking about this debt ceiling extension. That expires the first week of November, the same week that the new speaker is going to start. Boehner would like to get that done clearly before November 1 and get that off the table as well. But there's a lot of actually establishment Republicans that think they should use that as a budget reform process. So you can come up with realistic targets. We had sequestration come out of that in the past. So we'll see what happens going forward. But that's going to be a very, very dicey road to navigate.
That was going to be my question, is how likely is that? He has said that that's sort of something, but 30 days really, I mean, and some change we're talking about before he has said he will now step down. And yet there seems to be some other thoughts of how that should be taken care of. How likely is that in the 30 days something he could not have to pass off?
Well, I think the CR, I agree, the CR is going to be done this week. So that will roll that till December 11th. Then you can concentrate on things like debt ceiling. You'll have another month to deal with that. You can deal with the transportation bill. You can deal with ex-Im-Bank. You can deal with some of the other issues. Planned Parenthood, get some votes on that. So there's enough time. There's enough legislative days to do it. But any kind of debt ceiling extension is going to require negotiations and discussions with President Obama. You can't just pass this stuff in a vacuum and hope he's not going to sign something that he's not a part of. So anything, it puts John Boehner right back in the position of having to talk to the White House to come up with some deal on the debt ceiling extension. We know Obama doesn't want to do any deal. He just wants it extended.
And if you'd like to join in the conversation, give us a call, 703-387-1020 on the News Talk line. And Kelsey, in terms of talking, we get to December 11th. We've got a new Speaker of the House. Where do we go from here? I know so many people so tired of this continuing resolution and continuing to move this forward piece by piece. And yet it seems like if it's McCarthy or whoever else it is, we're talking hitting the ground running day one, working with what does not seem to be anytime soon a unified Republican Party.
You know, it's also not totally clear that the debt limit will hit that first week of November. The Treasury Department updates those numbers throughout the year, and they're waiting for receipts from corporate tax returns. So it could be pushed off until sometime in December, and that would create a very big problem in December. You would have debt limit, you would need a spending bill, and you would need to handle tax increases. There's a whole package of tax breaks that are expired or expiring at the end of this year. Last time we saw that was when we had the fiscal cliff. And we all know how lovely that turned out on the Hill. I anticipate that we could see something just as divisive and just as difficult come December.
We also know what it's like to have that backing itself up to the holiday break, in which we see many of them already having plans and their staff and taking perhaps the time they have to stay here in Washington and get the work done. When we move forward, Bob, we talk about the Republican Party. We have a nominee. We are down the road. We have a new Speaker of the House. We have a new Majority Leader. What does the Republican Party look like then?
Well, it depends on who the nominee is, right? I mean, if it's John Kasich, it will look one way. If it's Donald Trump, it will look another way. Yeah. So that's a pretty big hypothetical question. I think we're safe saying that Kevin McCarthy will likely be the next speaker. There's some others that are thinking about it, like Jeb Hensarling, chairman of the Financial Services Committee, and others, but nobody really, I think, has the base of support that Kevin's going to have. So you assume that, but picking the presidential nominee right now is
well, we've still got more than a dozen of them. Yeah,
very difficult to do. So it's tough to answer that question. But as I said, the differences are not so much on policy. They're on process and tactics. That debate will continue until Barack Obama is out of the White House.
And it also is something similar to what we're seeing in terms of the candidates, of how they are going about. Now, they don't all agree on the same things in terms of policy, but how they are going about all of that. And Kelsey, we're talking about moving forward November 1 on Capitol Hill. Where do the priorities lie to the end of the year? I mean, obviously, we've talked about debt, transportation. What do you think will actually get moved forward? Obviously, we have to deal with December 11th. Senate coming back up to a CR. Beyond that, what else do you think we get done by end of year?
You know what? All of these fiscal conversations are going to take up a lot of air and a lot of time, and they may squeeze out other important things that even leaders hope to get done. There was some thought that a cybersecurity bill could go through the Senate, though we're not sure about the timing on that. And there was a little bit of talk about criminal justice reform, but that's a big haul and they haven't really begun. So I think you're going to see a lot of attention on the Benghazi Committee in the House and the Planned Parenthood Committee in the House, and the rest of the actual legislative time will be spent on trying to figure out these big fiscal deals.
Something we will all be watching very closely, with the conversation beginning this week, perhaps, about the votes on both sides on the CR. And thank you so much, Kelsey and Bob, for being with us today. We'll be right back with more News Talk right after this.